Hi friends. Somebody at the Zendo last weekend asked if Zen was going to help us overcome our fear of death and dying. And I thought that that was a really important question. And partly because the fear of death and dying is one of the major drivers that brought me to practice. So when I was 6 or 7, I had this huge panic attack because the fact of my own mortality, the fact that I was going to die, hit me out of nowhere like a lightning bolt. It was really traumatic and really dramatic, and it was kind of a life-changing event. And at the same time, um, I became aware that all the people around me were going to die as well. And in addition to this kind of like awareness that has always been very, very present, I have throughout my life struggled at times with suicidal ideation. It's been something that off and on has been a part of my life since I was a child. And so this kind of proximity and awareness of death and dying has been a huge part of my journey in general, and a huge part of what brought me to practice, and is still a big part of my practice. Like my awareness of mortality is something that I'm cognizant of every day. It's not something that I really ever forget about or put away or kind of mush and not think about. And you see this kind of awareness and struggle with the reality of death and dying all throughout Buddhism. You know, the one of the sights that the Buddha saw that drove him to practice was a sick person, an old person, and a dead person. Right. So the fact of death and dying in this human form is, you know, very bedrock. It goes right to the bottom, the origin of Buddhism. At the same time, I think it's important that we recognize that Zen doesn't necessarily promise us a whole lot. It is not a kind of faith-based religious or spiritual practice where if you believe a certain thing or you act a certain way that you are promised some kind of eternal reward or going to heaven or some version of eternal life or some kind of you won't really die. Like that is not a part of a kind of Zen practice. What Zen is a method to investigate this life in this world and a framework to understand what we encounter. And so, as I like to say, Zen Buddhism is the scientific method of spiritual inquiry. We don't necessarily tell you what the answers are going to be. That wouldn't be a very good science. We give you a method to explore. And so it's an interesting question. Is Zen going to help me or you overcome our fear of death and dying? And I think ultimately it comes down to you and your practice. I think there are certain things that we as humans, as practitioners, are always going to have an awareness of and possibly a struggle of. I can tell you that my relationship to death and dying has changed over my 20 plus years of Zen practice, and I can really only speak for me because I can't necessarily say what your experience is going to be. So for me, death and dying was a massive source of anxiety and fear for a long time. Even into my adult years, I would lie awake at night, terrified of death, scared that I was going to die. And even after a lot of practice. And several years ago, 12-ish years ago, I was at the ocean with my fiance. We were actually scouting wedding venues. And so we were at the cliffs outside of Davenport, which is by Santa Cruz in California. And we're there, and a teenager fell off the cliff into the ocean and was unconscious in the water. And I was the closest one, and so I ended up going in after them while my fiance ran kind of up the cliff to where there was cell signal to call 911. And I swam out there, and it was New Year's Eve in Davenport in the Pacific Ocean. So it was really, really cold. And I remember my muscles started cramping pretty instantly. And so I got to the person, and they were already gone. I didn't know it at the time, but they had hit their head on the way down. And so I kind of flipped them over, realized that they were very much not with us, and I was trying to pull them back in, and I realized that I was going to drown. And so I had to let them go, and I started trying to swim back in. and my muscles were seizing up, and I just kind of went under and was like, oh, now I die. Like, I'm dead now. I'm gonna drown. And I went under. And I remember as the ocean was filling up my sight, as I was bobbing up and down, I kind of had this sense of like everything is fundamentally okay. The world is okay, because we don't spring into existence and then leave existence. When you look at something like the Heart Sutra that says no birth, no death, they're not saying that the particular person does not arise, but what they're saying is that you are not sprung into existence and then leave existence. You are this kind of like constant changing. And so when we arise in this particular form, we are a change into this form. Nothing is created, it's just a change. And then when this form dissipates, this form nothing is destroyed, it just changes form again. And so when I went under, when the ocean filled my vision, the feeling I had was that everything, the world, the universe was fundamentally okay. And then I had a thought that drowning in front of my fiance would be pretty fucked up. And so I managed to get a little bit of a second wind and smash onto some rocks and breathe for a few minutes and then swim the last little back in and flop on the rocks for quite a while. And that is how I'm here to talk to you today. And so what this story shows, and the way I relate to it through my Zen practice, is both the universal and the particularity. They are not separate. It is 100% true that I am an aspect of the functioning of this universe, just as you. And so if I had drowned, the universe aspect would be continuing. There would be the corpse in the water and maybe the little crabbies eating the body, but like the continuance, the continuing evolution, the continuing change, the continuing transformation that is the aspect of all things would continue. Nothing is destroyed. And the particularity of this being and my thoughts and feelings and my relationship to my wife and people around me, that the particular being and relationships are also of that. And drowning in front of my wife would have been pretty fucked up, and it gave me the strength to kind of have a second wind. And so you see the particularity and the universal functioning together because they are not separate. And having a very kind of powerful experience of that right in my face was really, really transformative for me. And some of the teachings that I had intellectually understood became much more alive for me in this kind of experience. And I remember several years later, I was giving a Dharma talk on the Heart Sutra where it talks about no birth, no death. And somebody asked me, well, if we say, nothing is created or destroyed, it's just changing forms, what do we call death? And, I was put on the spot. And I thought about it, and I said something that still feels very true for me. I said, I think all things are not only of the nature to change, but we are all changing. Change is kind of what we are. And there comes a certain point where someone or something has changed so much we no longer feel we can relate to them in the same way, and we call that death. I have friends and family that have passed on, and I still have a relationship with them. It's not like it's cut off and I never think about them or feel about them. There is still a relationship, but it's obviously quite different. And so when there is change that occurs that we no longer can relate in the way that we did before, we call that death. And this can be very hard and very challenging. And I don't think as humans that is necessarily going to go away. And some of us might struggle with it more than others. Impermanence can be really, really hard. Impermanence is the nature of the universe. And usually when we talk about impermanence and struggles with impermanence, it's things that we don't want to change. But my heart could not beat without impermanence. I could not exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide without impermanence. I could not drive to work. I could not beat a level in a video game. You or I could not get up and move. I couldn't wave my arm through the air without impermanence. Impermanence is not only our nature, but it is essential to the functioning of that nature. But when things that we like don't change, or things that we like do change in ways that we don't like, we say, well, that's the impermanence that I don't like. But it's all kind of the nature of things. And so it is not that death goes away through Zen practice. It is that hopefully we gain a deeper understanding of it in the context of the totality of the universe, and our relationship to death and dying might change. But that doesn't mean we wouldn't feel pain when a loved one dies, or fear in the face of our own mortality. I think those things are probably pretty natural. And even if pain or fear arises, that doesn't mean that we haven't changed our relationship. I think sometimes it's just that the fear of death or dying is included, and that's different than being controlled by it or trying to shove it away because it's so powerfully uncomfortable that we can't tolerate it. So does Zen practice help us overcome our fear of death or dying? I think that that is an individual question. Can the investigation and understanding we gain through Zen practice help us change our relationship to death and dying? For me, it has, and I think maybe for many other people it has as well. And I think if you practice, there's a good chance that it will for you as well, but we can't promise that. So I think the best thing you can do is to practice and see what arises for you. I hope that this is helpful, and I find the lack of a definitive yes, I promise to be comforting. I hope it is for you, but maybe it is upsetting, and I'm curious to hear what you have to say. Thank you.